Su Tongdao had a dream, a very long dream. He hadn't had that dream for a long time. After all, it was more than 20 years ago. In the dream, his father suddenly disappeared. Afterwards, many creditors came to his house to ask for debts. They said that the night before his father Su Wuxi's disappearance, he lost his money in gambling, and he disappeared on the same day, as well as the widow of his uncle Su Wei Donghe, the eldest mother. In a daze, Su Tongdao knew in his heart that this was not just a dream, but also a real thing that happened in his family more than 20 years ago. It was this incident that changed the fate of everyone in his family. At that time, he had just finished the high school entrance examination and was waiting at home for the high school entrance examination scores. Because his father suddenly disappeared and left a large amount of debts, he failed to go to high school. Afterwards, his high school entrance examination score came out with a score of 594. County number 2 middle school. There is also the younger brother Su Tonglu, who is only 1 year younger than him. He has excellent academic performance. He has been awarded certificates every year since he was a child. After barely finishing junior high school, he went out and went to the police station. The most serious one was after being in jail for 3 years before he came out. The whole person was considered useless. And the daughter adopted by his parents, his sister Jieyuzhu of Su Tongdao. At the age of 18, he was married by his mother early and married an unlearned second-generation ancestor. Life had been very difficult at the age of 26. Finally divorced, with a daughter, life has not improved. As for his mother, passed away just 3 days ago. Just after being buried during the day, his brother Su Tonglu was not seen until the burial, and no one could contact him. Su Tongdao has been divorced for 6 years and has no children. The family lives like this, and his heart is naturally distressed. In addition, his mother had just been buried, and he drank a little more wine at night, and didn't know when he fell asleep, and then he had this long dream. He knew it was a dream, but he still didn't want to wake up. Because in the dream, although his father is missing, his mother, brother, and sister are still there. Except for his frustrated dad, his family is fine. Big brother, big brother, big brother, wake up! Su Tongdao suddenly heard his sister's voice. She seemed to be calling him, as if she was screaming while shaking his shoulders. Sister came to see me? Sighed in his heart, he actually didn't want to wake up from this dream. Frowned and opened his eyes, Su Tongdao really saw his sister Jieyuzhu sitting on the edge of his bed, one hand still shaking his shoulder. Suddenly, Su Tongdao was stunned. Looked at the little sister Jieyuzhu in a daze, Jieyuzhu, who was already in her 30s, but she looked like a teenager in front of her. Slender figure, exquisite features, black pearl-like eyes, and a shiny black complexion. This sister, actually has no blood relationship with his whole family. Back then, his parents adopted her, who was still in their infancy, mainly because the family was poor and worried that their 2 sons would not be able to marry a daughter-in-law, so they adopted a girl from an early age, planning to wait for the 2 sons to grow up so that she could marry. One of them is to reduce the burden on the family. For this purpose, the younger sister Su Tongdao is not named Su, but is named Ji with his mother. Judging from his appearance, Jieyuzhu is quite beautiful. She has been slender since she was a child, and her facial features have been exquisite since she was a child. Her pair of black pearl-like eyes are particularly beautiful. Is the kind with very dark and shiny skin. Therefore, some people think she is beautiful, but more people think she is too dark and ugly. For example, his brother Su Tonglu, he thought his sister was ugly since he was a child, and he had never seen such a dark girl. As for him Su Tongdao, he didn't think his sister was ugly, but later he did not marry this sister for 2 reasons. One is that they grew up together, only brother and sister, no other feelings. Because when they were adults, their family was too poor. As the older brother, he didn't want his sister to continue to have a hard time with him, so he let his mother decide and betrothed his sister Jieyusha to someone else. Facts later proved that my sister married the wrong person. But that is something later, and there is no way to change it. Can be in front of my eyes. Sister Jieyusha turns out to be still a teenager. What's the matter? Su Tongdao frowned and looked around. What he saw made him even more surprised. The earth walls around, the green leaves on the roof, the old wooden bed, the old clothes by the bed, the old wooden table by the window, and 2 old chairs. Everything that I see is so familiar. These are what his family looked like before. Brother, are you better? Has the fever gone? Jieyusha frowned when he didn't make a sound, asked worriedly, and reached out to touch Su Tongdao's forehead. Fever? Su Tongdao blinked and remembered. The day after his dad suddenly disappeared, the creditors came to the house one after another, asking if his dad was at home first. Then they asked for money, and if there was no money to give, these creditors started to do it one after another. Took away all the 2 pigs, chickens, ducks, etc. he raised. Not only that, but also emptied all the rice in his barn and rice jar. The only electrical appliance in the house, the television, was also removed. After these people left, Su Tongdao's family was really a mess. Of course, this is not the direct cause of his fever. The direct reason was that after the family had no rice to cook, my mother sat there for a long time, then suddenly got up and called him, and went to Tang Khao village across the river to borrow rice from his second aunt's house. When I went, it was good. On the way back, it suddenly started to rain. He and his mother dragged 2 bags of rice in a wooden cart. After the arduous trek home, both he and his mother had a fever. He remembered this very clearly. Because it was this time, because the family had no money to see a doctor, so he just took some anti-fever medicine. He was young and in good health, and he soon recovered. But after his mother's fever subsided, she kept coughing for half a month. After, his mother got bronchitis. When the weather is cold, this old problem is easy to get, and she keeps coughing. Hey, okay. Brother, your fever seems to have gone. Sister Jieyusha touched his forehead, then touched her own forehead, and then she was relieved and smiled with joy. Su Tongdao smiled. Although the fever has subsided, he is now soft and the sequelae of the fever are still there. Where's Mom? Where's your second brother? My brother Su Tongla slept with him in this bed since he was a child, but now he is nowhere to be seen, so Su Tongdao asked subconsciously. Jieyusha sighed. Mom went to the polder. Second brother, he just went out to fish with a harpoon. Brother, are you hungry? Get up and eat. There is still porridge in the pot, which is specially reserved for you. Get up quickly. Wei? Su Tongdao frowned again. More long-term memories were suddenly remembered by him because of these 2 words. That's right. When there was a change in his family, it happened not long after the end of his senior high school entrance examination, which belonged to the rainy season, and it was the rainy season in 1998. The precipitation during the rainy season of this year is particularly heavy, and the dikes in many places have burst. Fortunately, the Zulan township where their family is located is not broken. Several earthen huts in the family have been preserved, but the crops on the ground have suffered. He remembers that all the farmland in his village was flooded this year. The crops in the ground were all submerged under the water. Standing in the village, looking across the farmland, it was as if he had seen the sea, a vast expanse of whiteness, full of water. Because of this, his family had a particularly difficult year, and the grain production in the ground was greatly reduced. And now is still in the rainy season. It rains almost every day. Sometimes it is day and night, with continuous rain. Occasionally it will be sunny for a few hours, and then it will rain suddenly. In such terrible weather, every household must send a person to protect the dike. It is mandatory and no one can be absent. is also because of this. Even though his family has been experiencing difficulties recently, his mother may not have gone back from her fever, but she still went to the Wihahyugzu. Su Tongdao worried about his mother. As for his younger brother Su Tonglu taking a harpoon to fish, he feels normal. In my memory, he and his brother would go out to fish every year during the rainy season. Because during the rainy season of each year, the amount of precipitation is generally very large, and many fish in the ponds swim into the fields and the water ditches beside the fields. At this time of the year, as long as you have the skills, you can do whatever you want in the fields and ditch. Even if the owner of the fish pond sees it, there is nothing to say. After all, it was not done in other fish ponds. Yu reading www.yuyugonshu.com. You go out first. I'll be out soon. Su Tongdao sent out his sister Jieyuzhu, and got up to dress and put on shoes. While he was putting on clothes and shoes, his brows kept frowning slightly, thoughtfully. How did you go back to 1998? He doesn't know the reason, and he doesn't care about the reason. Maybe he was born again. Or maybe his original life was a dream of Huang Liang, and the life in front of him is real. He doesn't care. What he was thinking at this time was how to lead this family out of the current predicament. In any case, he doesn't want the future of his family to be so unbearable. His father ran away, and his eldest son, who is about to become an adult, will become the pillar of the family. Last time, he failed to make this pillar. Now he has a chance to do it again. He will not allow himself to fail so much. He is determined to support this home. When walked out of the room, Su Tongdao had already made up his mind. At his 17-year-old appearance, he already has a heart that is nearly 40 years old. Seems to have matured a lot overnight. He is not tall, he is about 1 meter 7 years old, he is thin and has a faint hair on his mouth. Has a flat expression and a pair of bright eyes, but there is a calm smell. Sister Jieyuzhu came in through the back door of the hall with a large coarse porcelain bowl. In the large bowl was a thin bowl of porridge. There is only a small bowl of black pickles on the table of the old 8 immortals in the hall. Seeing him coming out of the room, Jieyuzhu smiled, "Brother, I have added porridge for you, come and eat it." "Good." Su Tongdao smiled slightly, his voice was gentle. He drank porridge with pickles. Su Tongdao didn't frown, even though his food was much better before he was reborn. Because of such hard days, he had lived too much before, and life forced him to adapt. Yuan Shikeng, after his father disappeared, he has done many kinds of jobs. Construction site workers, restaurant miscellaneous, security, cutting and matching, shopkeepers, bricklayers, utilities, packaging workers, housing agencies, food delivery, etc. Almost nothing is easy work, the easiest is probably the half-year as a security guard. He has eaten big fish and meat, but he just waited for a while. "Brother, where did you say Dad has gone?" "He will come back, right?" Jieyuzhu, who was sitting on a stool on the other side of the 8 immortal table, asked Su Tongdao softly. Su Tongdao heard the words, did not lift his head, only casually replied, "You will treat him as dead, so don't ask again. Remember." Jieyuzhu looked at him and whispered, "Oh." Su Tongdao drank rice porridge very fast. He drank half a bowl in a few mouthfuls. When he stretched out his chopsticks to pick up pickles again, he glanced at Jieyuzhu, who was silent beside him, and asked, "Do you remember coming to our house 2 days ago? Who are the people who are in debt and moving things?" Jieyuzhu frowned and blinked, with a puzzled expression. "Big brother, what do you want to do with this?" "Mom said that those things were moved away, and our family won't come back." Su Tongdao didn't argue with her, but frowned and asked, "Don't worry about that much, just tell me, how many people do you remember who came to move things that day? Tell me all." "Big brother." Jieyuzhu called him weakly, obviously still trying to persuade him. But under Su Tongdao's gaze, she still did not dare to persuade any more, lowered her head slightly, and whispered the names of several people. This incident is too long for Su Tongdao. It happened more than 20 years ago. He only remembers a few impressive things, but he can't remember the others. And his sister Jieyuzha can't remember all those people who came to their house a few days ago to ask for debts and move things. Maybe she didn't know them. Su Tongdao silently listened to the few names she had said. His expression was still calm. He nodded slightly, and then divided by two, drank the remaining half of the bowl of porridge. After drinking, I put down my chopsticks, got up and went to the wall of the gate to change rubber boots. It was still raining outside, and the village was full of mud roads, very muddy. Seeing that he was going out, it seemed that he was going to find those people to settle the accounts. Jieyuzha turned pale, and hurriedly followed up, eagerly persuading, "Big brother, big brother! Where are you going? You should not go, right? Mom has the final say." "Up. Never mind." Su Tongdao was unmoved. Yuan Shikeng, he and his brother listened to what his mother said. Forget it, did not trouble those people, but the result? Those creditors who emptied his house, when the food was received, came to their house and moved again. If it weren't for him and his brother Su Tonglu to fight with those people with a kitchen knife and an axe, their family would still have to was evacuated once. Is simply driving their family to death. So, just now Su Tongdao made a decision in his heart. Since this matter is not over yet, he should finish this matter as soon as possible. He will accompany him all, whether it is a literary or a martial artist. Is fearless, is a character he developed long before he was born again. After Yuan Shikeng's father disappeared, life at home was so difficult, he and his brother did not fight with others less often. If there are too many fights, there is nothing to be afraid of. Everyone carries a head on one shoulder, who should I be afraid of? You wash the pots and bowls at home and prepare lunch meals. You don't need to worry about the rest. Obedient. After changing his rubber boots, Su Tongdao took off an old umbrella hanging on the wall, and ordered his sister to raise his foot and go out. Came a worried call from my younger sister, "Big brother! Big brother, don't go! Big brother, come back!" Su Tongdao heard crying in his sister's voice. But he didn't turn his head back. Holding his umbrella, he walked towards the end of the village with a cold face. His dad is gone and disappeared very disgracefully. There are people in several nearby villages rumoring that his dad eloped with his elder aunt and left a pile of gambling debts for their orphans and widows. If he doesn't make changes in this life, he knows how sad the next day will be. He knows better than anyone else. In his memory, Yuan Shikeng not only received the grain from his home this year, but the creditors would also come to his home to grab it once. In the following many years, their family would not be able to raise their heads in the village. The people in the village not only laughed at their home behind their backs or even face to face, but the old bachelors and second-rates in the village wanted to beat his mother and his sister. Didn't pay attention to him and his brother. They have no man in their family, only 2.5-year-old children are left. Everyone dared to bully. He and his brother had fought many times over these matters. Fighting is not good, he knows. But it turns out that after he and his younger brother fought each time these incidents, their family's life in the village was a little better. At least, there are fewer and fewer people who dare to bully their family, bullying his mother and his sister. Yu reading www.yuuganshu.com gradually disappeared. As for the police, they haven't tried it. But the police cannot protect their whole family 24 hours a day. Their Sujia village is, after all, just a small village below the small county seat. There are certain things that must be faced by themselves. People are good at being bullied, horses are good at being ridden. Su Tongdao has long understood this truth. It may be better in the city, but in the countryside, especially in this era, if a family wants not to be bullied by others, there must be a scary man in the family. Sujia village is located between two mountain packs, one large and one small. A long ditch flows through the middle of the village. On a rainy day like today, the rain from the mountain will cause the water in this ditch to soar and rush toward the village. Will eventually flow into the West River about a mile away. As for Zai, that is into the Yangtze River. Su Tongdao walked on the dirt road next to the ditch with his umbrella under his umbrella, listening to the rushing water in the ditch. His face was cold, but his expression was calm, and he walked to the entrance of the small shop at the head of the village without any hurries. At this time, a bunch of women, children, and a few old men and old ladies were sitting at the commissary and chatting. The hostess of the commissary, Wang Kuihua, was sitting behind the counter and knocking the seeds with a smile. These people saw Su Tongdao, who was holding an umbrella, walking toward him with a cold face. An old lady asked curiously, "Xiaodao, are you here to buy things? Does your family still have money to buy things?" Su Tongdao ignored her. He walked to the counter without squinting and coldly, and said to Wang Kuihua inside the counter, "Where is Jinshan in your house? Let him come out." Su Jinshan is Wang Kuihua's husband and the owner of this shop. In Su Tongdao's impression, this Su Jinshan had a better mind. Apart from farming, he was also a carpenter. He also contracted the largest fish pond at the end of the village. He was also the first to open a small shop in the village. So his family's life is very moist. In his spare time, Su Jinshan also likes to gamble, but because he is smarter, he never heard that he has lost big money, but often wins. Su Tongdao remembers clearly that after his father disappeared that year, it was Su Jinshan who moved his TV. Reborn, a black and white TV set, Su Tongdao doesn't care. But he wants to return the things that those people moved today is the second thing. His real purpose is to establish prestige. The 17-year-old wants to stand up, which sounds a bit ridiculous. But he has to do this, otherwise the next few years his mother, brother and sister will definitely have a hard time. Even if he can earn money to support them, those bullies in the village will definitely bully them every few days. He wants to hit a punch, lest he get 100 punches. "Hey? Are you looking for my Jinshan? Oh, Xiaodao. Why is your child not big or young today? My Jinshan and your parents are the same generation, so you call his name directly? That's how your parents taught you." He he. Wang Kuihua looked up and down Su Tongdao, sneered, and looked disdainful. Didn't mean to call Su Jinshan out at all. Is he at home? Su Tongdao refused to answer her words, and asked coldly. He estimated that Su Jinshan was at home. Although every household has recently sent people to the polder to prevent flooding, Su Jinshan is too smart. Because his father is old, he will not be assigned to heavy jobs after going to the polder, let alone dangerous jobs, but if Su Jinshan goes to the polder himself, he may not be able to escape from heavy jobs and dangerous jobs. Go. What's the matter for your mother to come over and say, "What are your little kids talking about?" Go. Wang Kuihua waved her hand like a beggar, and hurried Su Tongdao away impatiently. Su Tongdao sneered silently. Wang Kuihua's words had confirmed him that Su Jinshan was at home at this time. She was impatient to talk to him, and he was impatient to talk nonsense to her. Although his body is not really adult yet, he doesn't bother to fight with a woman. Immediately lowered his head and closed the umbrella, and suddenly he shouted, "Su Jinshan! Get out of me, there is a kind of. Get out!" Because the yelling was too loud and the noise fell, Su Tongdao's entire face was already gloomy and red, and he was full of anger. Suddenly all these people at the commissary department were taken aback, and a few who stood close to him had already subconsciously stepped aside. At the same time, many people nearby came out surprisingly to watch the excitement. Rural people like to watch the excitement. Wang Kuihua at the counter also stood up suddenly in fright, and took 2 steps back. She pointed at Su Tongdao in amazement and scolded, "Xiaodao! Your little thing took the wrong medicine? Why did you come to my house to make you crazy? You what about mom? Go ahead and ask your mom to talk about it. Go, go. Su Tongdao stared at her coldly, but still ignored her, staring at the door of her master bedroom with a gloomy face, because he had heard Su Jinshan's voice asking, "Who? Which little devil came to Lao Zi's house to run wild? Who is that?" As soon as the voice fell, the door opened, and Su Jinshan, with a round face and shaved head, strode out of the room angrily. Su Jinshan was about 1.75 meters tall, a bit taller than Su Tongdao. The key is that his family's food is good, he is a middle-aged person, and his body looks much stronger than Su Tongdao. As soon as he came out, Wang Kuihua seemed to have found the backbone, trod over quickly, pointed at Su Tongdao outside the counter, and drank, "It's him. Jinshan, it's this kid. This kid doesn't know what medicine he took wrong today. Run to our house to run wild, go and chase him away. Go and go. Don't let him stand here. Trail." Su Jinshan raised his brows, looking quite surprised. Then he smiled disdainfully, strode over and waved his hands again and again like a fly, "Get out. Your dad sent me the money and haven't paid it back. Do you dare to come to my house to make trouble? If you don't get out, I will break your leg. Hurry up. Roll." The last sentence quick roll adds to the tone. At this time, those people who were chatting at the entrance of the small shop have ran to the door of the opposite house and looked over here. Only Su Tongdao was left standing in front of the counter of Su Jinshan's house with an old umbrella in his hand. Su Jinshan sternly threatened, Su Tongdao sneered slightly. Both heels grew like roots, and stood motionless. Looked at Su Jinshan with an impatient face with cold eyes, and said coldly, "Give me back the things that robbed my house. Or I will warn you for robbery." "Robbery in the house?" Su Jinshan frowned, stopped, his expression was wrong, and then he laughed, "Oh, your dad owes me money, now your dad has nothing to plant and runs away without a trace. Your family has no money to pay back, I'm going to move things. What's the matter? Hey, robbery? I want to sue Lao Tzu, right? Go. Go sue. Lao Tzu is still afraid that you will fail? Go. Go." Su Tongdao stared at Su Jinshan with cold eyes for 2 seconds, his gaze fell down, and landed on the counter of Su Jinshan's house. There was a red landline phone on the counter, which was used by the villagers. Of course, every time he used this phone, Yu reading www.yuyuganshu.com must pay. Su Tongdao didn't talk nonsense. He took 2 steps forward, picked up the phone, and under the staring gaze of Su Jinshan and Wang Kuihua, he did not hesitate to call the police. Dialed and said, "Okay. Then let you see if the law protects gambling debts. As long as the law does not protect gambling debts, then you go to my house a few days ago as a robbery." Before he finished speaking, he had dialed the 3 digits of the alarm. He put the microphone to his ear and raised his eyes and looked at Su Jinshan, who was a few steps away, with a sneer. Su Jinshan's expression changed at that time. The law does not protect gambling debts, of course he has heard of it. However, people in rural areas usually solve their problems by themselves. Very few people will report to the police when they encounter problems. For things like gambling debts, those who cannot pay for gambling debts will be moved by the creditor. The villagers also think it is normal. Almost no one has reported this to the police. After all, paying off debts is justified. And, if you call the police, the creditors who come to move things will be punished by the law, but the debtors who call the police will also be punished for gambling, and it is entirely possible to go to jail. Like Su Tongtaoist family, people who owed gambling debts escaped without a trace, leaving all gambling debts to the old women and children. At least these nearby villages have not appeared. In an instant, Su Jinshan's brainstorming talent came into play. He immediately thought that Su Tongdao, the kid, was not afraid to call the police, but when the police came, Su Jinshan might really be taken to jail. Robbery, but a felony. Immediately he made 3 steps and 2 steps, rushed over, stretched out his hand, and held the telephone landline for the first time, and quickly grabbed the microphone from Su Tongdao's hand with the other hand, hurriedly pressed it back on the landline, and yelled in anger. You really fight when you step on a horse? Do you know how to pay off debts? Are you still unreasonable? Hey! There are already many people gathering not far away to watch the excitement, at least dozens of people. There are men and women of all ages. From the scene, Su Tongdao, who is thin and short, is at a disadvantage in front of Su Jinshan. At least at first glance. But only Su Jinshan can feel the determination and toughness of Su Tongdao standing in front of him. Facing Su Jinshan's scolding, Su Tongdao remained unmoved, staring into Su Jinshan's eyes coldly, and only asked, "You still haven't paid it back?" The eyes of the crowd were full of scrutiny, and there was a lot of discussion. Su Jinshan jumped up irritably, his face flushed, and suddenly raised his hand to Su Tongdao's face. "Are you looking for death?" Su Tongdao finally took a step back. He was young and flexible. Stepped back and avoided the slap that Su Jinshan drew. Because there was a counter between them, Su Jinshan couldn't rush to continue fighting. Su Tongdao didn't go mad, and rushed in to fight Su Jinshan desperately. It's true that he wants to stand up today, but he doesn't plan to fight hard. It's not worth it. Before rebirth, he was nearly 40 years old after all, and he was not so impulsive. He believed that Su Jinshan did not have the urge to desperately, so he coldly looked at Su Jinshan, who was flushed inside the counter. His eyes fell again, swept across the counter, saw a fruit knife, and stepped forward and pinched it. "Hand the handle of the knife to Su Jinshan," he said in a cold voice. "You're going to be cruel? Then stabbed me with a knife. I promise to stand here and stay here. Come on. Stabbing. If you don't stabbed, you are a coy. If you don't stabbed, you must pay me back. Otherwise, I'm not over with yours. Stabbed or not." At the same time as the last sentence was uttered, Su Tongdao brought the fruit knife in his hand closer to Su Jinshan. At this time, the people who watched the excitement not far away were in an uproar. Someone shouted, "Ouch, you can't move the knife. Never use the knife." Someone also shouted, "Jinshan, don't be muddled. You can't be as knowledgeable as a child." Someone still scolded, "Xiaodao. Xiaodao, your kid is crazy? Put the knife down." Someone wanted to rush over to pull the frame, but looking at the knife in Su Tongdao's hand, they didn't dare to come closer for fear of being injured by mistake. The hardest thing to ride a tiger down was Su Jinshan in the counter. He watched Su Tongdao, who had handed the handle of the knife in front of him, and his face became even redder. He gritted his teeth and stared at Su Tongdao. "I cleaned it up," but listening to the rushing persuasion of those not far away, as well as the exclamation and obstruction of his wife Wang Qiwa behind him, his eager right hand did not dare to really hold the fruit knife. According to the old saying in the countryside, "You are terribly afraid, and you are afraid of death." At this time, Su Tongdao's younger sister Ji Yuzhu also ran up at some point, just in front of the crowd not far away. Seeing this scene in front of her, she paled with fright and cried out, Big brother, come back soon. Big brother! Big brother!" Su Tongdao heard it, but did not look back. How can the matter of Luwei be abandoned halfway? He just expected Su Jinshan to not have the courage to desperately. If a young man who was about his age stood in front of him, Su Tongdao would definitely not dare to pass the handle of the knife to the opponent, and would use the words just now to stimulate him. Because the young man dared to do anything after his blood was on his head, regardless of the consequences. But a middle-aged person like Su Jinshan's age, and a shrewd person, is much less courageous. "Give it back to you! Give it back to you! Xiaodao, you put the knife down quickly, can't you return everything from your house? I beg you, this little ancestor, it's crazy." Wang Qiwa couldn't stretch it any longer, and rushed up. While shouting to admit the bad luck, he hurriedly pulled Su Jinshan back, blushing and thick. Forcibly, he didn't say anything harshly, and didn't say that he didn't agree to return the things. After a long time, I didn't see the bridge. I saw Su Tongdao coming out of Su Jinshan's house with a cold face holding a TV set. Su Jinshan, who had consciously lost his face, was gone, probably hiding in his house and sulking. Those men, women, old and children who were watching the excitement not far away looked at Su Tongdao with different expressions at this time, and there was a lot of discussion. Ji Yuzhi still had tears on his face, stumbled and trod over quickly. "Big brother, are you okay, big brother?" Su Tongdao stood under the canopy, raised his chin slightly, motioned to the umbrella he was leaning against the wall just now, and instructed his sister, "Bring the umbrella and hold it for me. It's still raining outside, so the TV will be useless when it gets wet." "Hey, hey!" Ji Yuzhi was very obedient, and hurried over to take an umbrella to support Su Tongdao. Then the two brothers and sisters walked towards the end of the village under the gaze of the men, women and children onlookers, one holding the TV and the other holding the umbrella. "Xiaodao, this kid is a little scary. This kid is ruthless. Where is his brother Xiaolu? Xiaolu seems to have a bigger temper, why didn't he come? He went to the fields to fish on the same road. I saw him walking away with a harpoon just now. Fortunately, the little fellow didn't come together. The kid was more impulsive than his brother. If they came together just now, things might have become even bigger." The voices of the onlookers talking, Su Tongdao heard some, Yu reading www.yuyuganshu.com only heard some, and didn't look at who said it. He knows his brother Su Tonglu better than these people. He knew that these people were right. If his brother had just come together, things might be uncontrollable. That kid did well in his studies, but his personality was very impulsive. Launched to ruthless, it was really reckless. This is also one of the reasons why he decided to come to Su Jinshan alone. At this time today, he feels very good. My mother went to the polder and was not at home. My brother went out to fish and was not at home. Only him and his younger sister Ji Yuzhi were left at home. Otherwise, if his mother is at home, she will definitely stop him. If my brother Su Tonglu is at home, he will definitely follow him, and he will definitely carry someone who can hurt others in his hands. Brother, let's just send the TV home, okay? Don't go to other people, I'm afraid. On the way back, Ji Yuzhi, who was holding an umbrella, begged Su Tongdao in a low voice. Su Tongdao glanced at her, sighed, and whispered, "Yuzhi, there are some things you don't understand, so just leave it alone. Don't worry, I have a sense of measure." Ji Yuzhi said bitterly, "Brother, Mom said, forget it, so you can save some trouble, okay? I beg you." Su Tongdao shook his head, "No. Don't persuade you. Some things can be allowed, but this can't be allowed. You will understand later." Ji Yuzhi still wants to persuade. She was really scared. She was afraid that her brother would be beaten when he went to the next house to ask for something. But how can she persuade Su Tongdao? As soon as he sent the TV home, he took the umbrella and went out again. When he was out, he turned around and told his sister to take good care of the house and not to follow. Sujia village is ranked by generation. Most people in the village only know a few common ones, such as, and. Because of the older generation, either is dead or usually has no sense of existence, and the younger generation is basically not born yet. The brothers Su Tongdao and Su Tonglu are obviously of the same character. The names of their brothers are also more traditional. The second word of the name is their generation. Like Su Jinshan, they belong to those who have no seniority in their names. Su Hongbing is 27 years old this year. He lives in the village but on the other side of the ditch. He is not very old, but he has a lot of seniority. belongs to the constant character generation. This generation is generally old in Sujia village. What does this mean? It shows that Su Hangbing's family is not prosperous. For example, Su Hangbing's dad is old and successful. Su Hangbing is only 27 years old. His dad has been dead for 3 years. The universe has a long history, Hengwei is the same glory. Su Hangbing is only 10 years older than Su Tongdao, but his generation is 2 generations higher than Su Tongdao, which can explain the problem. If nothing else, Su Hangbing may also have difficulty getting married and having children, and his descendants may still lag further behind. Reason? Because Su Hangbing is not good looking, he has a fierce face and a bad temper. Not to mention that the family is poor, since his father passed away. Su Hangbing's old mother has no control over this rebellious son since childhood. In the past 3 years, Su Hangbing has not passed by. There are 4 kinds of eating, drinking, prostitution, and gambling. Except for whether or not prostitution is not, everyone is not very clear. The other 3 things are taken care of by this guy. His family is not rich, but also 3 earthen houses. Just now when Su Tongdao was making trouble at Su Jinshan's house across the river, he heard the movement and went to the other side of the river to watch the excitement. At this time, he had just returned home. He smoked under the sweet-scented osmanthus tree, half squinted at the big girls and little wives who were washing clothes in the river across the river. His old lady was sitting not far away peeling soybeans, and he didn't mean to help. When he was almost finished smoking a cigarette, he saw Su Tongdao, who had just gone to Su Jinshan's house and had a fight, walking towards him with an umbrella. At that time, Su Hangbing's 2 messy thick eyebrows wrinkled, curled his mouth in disdain, flicked cigarette soot, and spit out a heavy sputum in front of Su Tongdao. Stared provocatively at Su Tongdao who had stopped. Su Hangbing is a second-rate son in the village. He doesn't get in with oil and salt and is not easy to provoke. Su Tongdao knows this in his heart. Yuan Shikeng, among the people who often harass his sister Ji Yuzhu, there is this Su Hangbing who has been bachelor. If he had a choice, Su Tongdao would not even have the interest to take a look at this guy, and he would never want to have any dealings with this person in his entire life. But Su Tongdao still came. Is still the purpose Liwei. He wants the whole village to know that Su Tongdao is not easy to mess with. Only by achieving this goal can his mother, brother, and sister live in the village better in the future. Even if he knew in his heart that Su Hangbing was much more difficult to deal with than Su Jinshan, he still chose to come and meet Su Hangbing once. Looked down at the thick sputum that Su Hangbing had just vomited in front of him. Su Tongdao's complexion was very cold, and he had a premonition in his heart. If you don't have a fight today, I'm afraid it won't work. Su Hangbing is 10 years older than him. He is taller and stronger than him. In his impression, Su Hangbing, who is not in the right way, fights with people a lot. He has never heard of this guy losing. Although Su Tongdao has a lot of experience in fighting in his previous life, his current 17-year-old body, he is not sure that he can beat Su Hangbing. But it's not important. Even if they lose, let Su Hangbing know that Su Tongdao is not easy to provoke. So. Su Tongdao raised his head with a cold face, and looked at Su Hangbing at each other. Su Hangbing. You robbed 2 bags of rice from my house, don't you return it. Su Hangbing sneered, took a puff of cigarette, tilted his head slightly, sneered at Su Tongdao with a squint, and uttered 2 words in a simple and clear way, no. At this time, many men, women, and children gathered not far away to watch the excitement. These talents have seen Su Tongdao go to Su Jinshan's house to make a fuss. Just now when they saw him come to Su Heng's military house, many people actually watched from a distance, and watched him stop talking in front of Su Hangbing. These villagers who like to watch the excitement have already gathered around. Su Hangbing's mother is a thin, small, honest woman. At this time, seeing Su Tongdao and her son having a dispute, she frowned tightly and stood up. She was not in the mood to peel the beans for the time being. Persuaded with a worried look, little soldiers, they are all from the same village, or else, you should return the rice to the little Taoist. Don't worry about it. Shut up. Su Hongbing turned his head and yelled, turned his face, and sneered his neck 2 steps in front of Su Tongdao, sneered with a grim expression, I won't pay it back, how can you drop it? Lao Tzu is not the soft guy of Su Jinshan, who kind of you give me a knife to try, and see if I dare to stab you. Don't say, Su Tongdao really dare not. Because he estimated that Su Hongbing, a bachelor and lawless man, really dare to attack him. Are you sure you won't pay it back? Su Tongdao's expression remained unchanged, and he coldly confirmed. Su Hongbing is one step closer, you reading www.youcanshu.com pointed at Su Tongdao with his right finger holding the cigarette, and then sneered, I will definitely not return it. Do you dare to call the police and try? To the police, it is not long ago that Su Tongdao threatened Su Jinshan. These words suppressed Su Jinshan, but he obviously couldn't suppress Su Hongbing. Little soldiers, they are all from the same village, don't do that. Su Hongbing's old lady couldn't help but persuade her again. Su Hongbing suddenly turned his head and yelled angrily, shut up, you. At the moment he turned his head, Su Tongdao, who had always been cold-faced, gave a sharp gaze, and suddenly shot. The umbrella he held in his right hand suddenly rose up and slammed it around Su Hongbing's neck. Snapped. There was a sound. Su Hongbing was staggered. Before turning his head back, Su Tongdao rushed forward. He grabbed Su Hongbing's right arm with his left hand, threw the umbrella with his right hand, and slammed Su Hongbing's face with one punch after another. Su Hongbing screamed again and again, mixed with a few threatening words, and his mouth was very fierce, but the scene was very embarrassed, and he staggered back and stumbled again and again by Su Tongdao, who shot with all his strength. After a few moments, amidst the exclamation of the onlookers, he fell on the muddy wet ground with a thud. Su Tongdao was so powerful that he took advantage of the momentum and rode on Su Hongbing. His fists were still smashed, making Su Hongbing no fight back. Force. Su Tongdao at this time is fierce. Even if he heard Su Hongbing's old lady rushing over to pull the frame in a panic, Su Tongdao did not immediately stop, he wanted Su Hongbing to remember the fight. Until several men came over and pulled him up, he barely pulled him away from Su Hongbing. At this time, Su Hongbing had been beaten up with a bruised nose and swollen face. Not all men in Sujiakan have the surname Su. Such as Ge Xiaotian. Ge Xiaoshan's home is diagonally opposite Su Heng's military home, with a ditch 2 to 3 meters wide in between. At this time, Ge Xiaotian and a few friends gathered together under the poplar trees on the side of the ditch, watching the excitement on the side of the ditch, and seeing Su Tongdao, who was only 2 years older than him, meeting him in normal times, only dared to see him. Su Hongbing, who was taking a detour, fell to the ground and couldn't get up. Ge Xiaotian was very excited to see this scene, because Su Hongbing often bullied him on weekdays. In fact, because he was stupid since he was a child and had little brains, there are many people in this village who bully him on weekdays, but there are very few people who give him a kick at every turn like Su Hongbing. So Ge Xiaotian saw Su Hongbing being knocked to the ground by Su Tongdao, he was so excited that he wanted to pee. At this moment, his sister suddenly called him from home, Xiaotian? Xiaotian! What are you doing there? Come back! Come back and sweep the floor! Hey, here comes it! Ge Xiaotian reflexively agreed, but he was still a little reluctant to just go home like this. He dangled, his eyes still staring at the other side to see the excitement. Not long after, his sister's shout came from his home again, Ge Xiaotian. Did you hear that I called you back? Get out of here! Hurry up! Hey, here comes! Ge Xiaotian grimaced, turned his head back home one step at a time, and looked at Su Heng's house from time to time. Then his ears suffered. A white jade hand stretched over and pinched his ears. With a firm twist, Ji Xiaotian cried out in pain, and stood on tiptoe quickly begging for mercy. It hurts. Sister, sister. Don't pull it, don't pull it, I'm wrong, I'm wrong. A small black face was wrinkled, and he turned to his sister pitifully, tears coming out of his eyes. In terms of appearance, Ji Xiaotian and his sister Ji Xiaoyu are not very similar. First of all, the skin tone is different. Ji Xiaotian is dark, but Ji Xiaoyu is very white, unlike a country girl. Is different on the head. 15-year-old Ji Xiaotian is only 1 meter and 4 years old, but 18-year-old Ji Xiaoyu is already slim, round and jade. She is completely a big girl, at least 1 meter and 7 feet taller than many men in the village. Let's talk about looks. Ji Xiaoshan's facial features can only be said to be not ugly. But Ji Xiaoyu is very beautiful. In the eyes of many people in the village, Ji Xiaoyu is definitely the most beautiful girl in Sujia village, with red lips and white teeth, bright eyes and a big waist-length braid. Because she does not have a surname Su, almost all the boys in the village who are about her age are interesting to her. Some are several years older than her, and they usually want to hook her. Let's put it this way. On weekdays, as long as Ji Xiaoyu walks out of the gate, he can't go far. There must be a boy or man around to come and talk to her. This is related to her appearance, her surname, and her diligence. Is easy to understand that it has something to do with her appearance. Is related to her surname because Sujia village has a rule handed down from ancient times that the same surname is not allowed to marry. Between the same surname, regardless of whether they appear in the 5 clothes, the village rules are like this, which causes the boys in adolescence to subconsciously not think about the girls of the same surname, and Ji Xiaoyu, whose surname is Ji, is so beautiful that they naturally rush them. Besides, Ji Xiaoyu is also very diligent. Every day, she goes to the ditch in front of her to wash her clothes, wash rice, and wash vegetables. The house is also cleaned by her, and she does things very quickly. This is very flattering. Who doesn't like hard-working women? The only thing that made the boys hesitate a little. Ji Xiaoyu has a bad temper. Is very spicy. On weekdays, no matter who came to talk to her, she didn't have a good face, and praised her for her beauty, and she let you go, help her with the work, she let you go away, move closer to her, wanting to take advantage of her. When she started beating people, is like a thorny rose, which makes people want to pick but dare not pick it. When Su Tongdao's father hadn't disappeared, Su Tongdao was also interested in Ji Xiaoyu, and he liked to join her on weekdays. For this, I have received a lot of scolding, and I have also passed Ji Xiaoyu's feet. Letting go of his brother's ears with an unhappy expression, Ji Xiaoyu glanced at the villagers outside watching the excitement, frowning and asked, "What are you doing outside? So many people are watching the excitement there." She is curious after all. Ji Xiaotian rubbed his sore ears, and went to the corner to grab a broom, and said as he walked, "The trail is going to trouble Su Hongbing. Just now I beat Su Hongbing so hard, hee." Speaking of Su Hongbing being beaten, Ji Xiaotian was happy again. It feels really good to be beaten by someone who bullies me the most. What? The trail beat Su Hongbing? Really? Can he beat Su Hongbing? Impossible, right? Ji Xiaoyu was surprised, and subconsciously walked to the gate and looked at the gate of Su Hongbing's house. Ji Xiaotian took the broomstick, walked to her side with a smile, looked over there, and said enthusiastically, "Who said that?" When Su Hongbing was beaten by the trail just now, Su Hongbing didn't even get started and was beaten. Ji Xiaoyu blinked a pair of white eyes. Yu reading www.yuyugonshu.com looked over there in surprise. Her feelings in her heart at this time are complicated. She didn't like Su Hongbing and Su Tongdao. To be precise, she hates all the young men in this village. Su Hongbing is 9 years older than her, but when I see her on weekdays, I also want to take advantage of her. Su Tongdao is 1 year younger than her, and she has been in the same class as her since she was a child, but she also hates it because that guy also has a bad heart for her. Of course, in comparison, she definitely hates Su Hongbing more. Not only because Su Hongbing is 9 years older than her, but also because Su Hongbing is ugly and fierce, and even more because Su Hongbing is so angry and doesn't follow the right way. So, just now, I heard my brother say that Su Tongdao had beaten Su Hongbing. She was surprised and very happy. There is a kind of joy to see a dog biting a dog. At this moment, she finally saw Su Tongdao carrying a snakeskin bag or something, coming out of the door of Su Heng's military house. At the same time, he heard the brother beside him say excitedly, "Okay. Okay. The trail has really moved out of Su Heng's military house with a bale of rice, hehe, Su Hongbing is embarrassed this time." Before S words fell, his and Ge Xiaohu's eyes widened at the same time, and surprises appeared on their faces. Because they suddenly saw a muddy Su Hongbing holding a kitchen knife and rushing out of the kitchen next to his main house aggressively. "Be careful!" Ge Xiaohu subconsciously exclaimed in surprise. While watching the lively crowd, many people exclaimed at the same time. I guess everyone didn't expect Su Hongbing to be so reckless, so he dared to use a chopper. What kind of person Su Hongbing is, Tongdao Su has known all his life. Many people in the village behind the evaluation of Su Hongbing is Face's skin leopards. What is meant by shit skin leopard? Simply put, this kind of person cannot be touched, because once they are contaminated, they can't get rid of them. Shit-skin quarrels and fights with people usually do not win or stop. In the country, this kind of people are usually found in every village. Everyone is used to stay away from such people and try not to deal with such people. When Su Tongdao just entered Su Hongbing's house to move rice, he was always on guard against Su Hongbing's anger, and the dog jumped over the wall in a hurry. Especially when he came out of the gate carrying a bag of rice, Su Tongdao deliberately watched and listened to all directions. Therefore, when Su Hongbing was holding a kitchen knife and rushing out of the kitchen aggressively, Su Tongdao noticed it for the first time. He stopped immediately and looked at Su Hongbing, who rushed over coldly. Su Hongbing turned into anger quickly, and in the blink of an eye, he rushed to the front of Su Tongdao. At that moment, Su Tongdao felt cruel, and suddenly his left foot straddled forward. On one side of his body, the bag of rice on his right shoulder naturally changed its position, just blocking the chopper Su Hongbing had chopped down. With a squeak, the snakeskin bag containing the rice burst through a big gap, and the yellow-orangey-orange rice rushed out. Su Hongbing hurriedly pulled out the kitchen knife. Before he could cut the second knife, Su Tongdao shook his shoulder and threw the bag of rice on Su Hongbing at Su Hongbing. It happened to hit Su Hongbing in the face. Su Hongbing staggered and fell. Before Su Hongbing could stand firmly, Su Tongdao had already rushed over and threw Su Hongbing to the ground again, hitting Su Hongbing's right arm with a knife with a fist, and the kitchen knife immediately separated from Su Hongbing's right hand. Followed, just as the onlookers cried out, Su Tongdao gave Su Hongbing another fat beating. Hit Su Hongbing screaming again and again, struggling constantly, holding his head tightly with both hands. This time, a lot of people soon came to fight, including Su Hongbing's old lady, the village head and others, who stubbornly forced Su Tongdao away. Diagonally across the water ditch, Ge Xiaohu and his brother Ge Xiaotian were standing at the gate of their house, watching this scene over there in astonishment. Ge Xiaohu blinked his big eyes and couldn't believe it. She knows how arrogant and difficult Su Hongbing is in the village. This fellow Su Tongdao and she have been classmates since childhood. She also knew what kind of person she was. In her opinion, Su Tongdao would definitely not provoke Su Hongbing, let alone beat Su Hongbing a rogue. But just now, she witnessed how Su Tongdao threw Su Hongbing to the ground and how fierce he was. The 17-year-old Su Tongdao actually beat the 27-year-old Su Hongbing like this. When is this guy able to fight like this? It was her brother Ge Xiaotian who was shocked. He was too excited. He lowered his voice excitedly beside her and said, good fight, hee hee, the trail is too good, Su Hongbing should fight, good. Great. Not far away, I stood by the ditch and watched the lively Su Jinshan on the opposite side with everyone. At this moment, with half of the cigarette in his hand, he looked calmly at the village chief and the others on the side of the ditch. They were already mediating Su Tongdao and Su Hongbing. Contradictory, Su Jinshan calmly said nothing. But Wang Kuihua, the wife standing next to him, lowered her voice and said, when did this trail become so cruel? Fortunately, you didn't really do anything with him just now. This kid is not afraid to die now. Su Hongbing always has a kitchen knife. After coming out, this kid dared to fight back. Let's save this as another ruthless person. Su Jinshan stayed silent for a few seconds and said in a low voice, this should be the dog jumping over the wall. He ran away, leaving so many gambling debts for their orphans and widows, and the family's livestock and food have been evacuated. This kid is probably going crazy. At this time, I am afraid this kid really dares to fight people desperately. Wang Kuihua had a lingering fear and said in a low voice, it's okay, we returned the TV to him, but fortunately, you didn't really do anything with him. The head of the village and other village officials were also frightened. I'm afraid that this is really a big deal, and that village officials like them will be involved. Anyway, several village cadres who were already on the scene at this time are strongly intervening in the contradiction between Su Tongdao and Su Hongbing. The village accountant whispered to persuade Su Tongdao, and then went over to persuade Su Hongbing in a low voice. The director of women is doing the work of Su Hongbing's wife patiently, analyzing the pros and cons for him, hoping that Su Hongbing's wife can control Su Hongbing. Village chief Su Hongchun was stern, and Su Hongbing, who had finished cursing with his sword, came to warn Su Tongdao, who was still cold. Anyway, there is only one main meaning, no more hands. Su Tongdao, who hadn't suffered twice, was silent, but just glanced at Su Hongbing not far away coldly. Su Hongbing, who was violently beaten on the ground twice, was already like a clay figure, his body was too dirty to see, his face was swollen like a pig's head, and his eyes were almost swollen into two lines. The underside of the nostrils was bloody. Just now he wiped it arbitrarily. The blood stained half of his face. A village official handed him a handkerchief, and he just wiped it casually. A pair of eyes stared at Su Tongdao sternly, but he didn't dare to rush in front of Su Tongdao again. Was beaten twice, and Yu reading www.yuyuganshu.com was beaten to the ground twice by Su Tongdao, which really scared him a bit. After some mediation to the end, the village chief proposed a solution. The 2 bales of rice that Su Hongbing removed from Su Tongdao's family a few days ago were returned to Su Tongdao. The other package was regarded as Su Tongdao's medical expenses for Su Hongbing. Then he asked Su Hongbing and Su Tongdao if they agree. Su Hongbing was silent. Su Tongdao frowned for a while, and said, if he agrees, I will agree. So the village chief asked with a calm face, Su Hongbing, say, do you agree with me? Don't pretend to be deaf and dumb to Laozi, hurry up. Su Hongbing looked at the villagers who looked around, his face was a bit ugly, but he still didn't say anything. When his old mother said repeatedly, okay. Whatever you say, the village chief, our Hongbing has no objection. Su Hongbing looked at his old mother dissatisfiedly, but still did not say disagree. With a cold snort, he stepped into his own hall, consciously he had no face to see people. The matter is solved like this. When Su Tongdao carried out a bale of rice from Su Hongbing's house again, the village chief came to him with a calm face and asked him, Xiao Dao, I know how many people were moving to your house a few days ago. Tell me the truth, will I go to those few stores to ask for things next? Su Tongdao stopped, looked at the village chief, and said yes. Village chief Su Hongchun couldn't help rolling his eyes, exhaling sullen breath, pressing his temples with a headache, and suddenly gritted his teeth and said, "Since you are determined to do this, let us go with you. But you have to say it first, and then we'll talk to others, so don't say anything. Anyway, we try to help you get everything back. You don't like it?" Su Tongdao glanced across the faces of the village head and others, nodded slightly, middle. His goal of establishing power today has almost been achieved, so since the village chief and they are willing to help him get other things back, then he has no reason to refuse. Because obviously, if the village chief and others help him out, it will definitely be much less difficult to get other things back. He Su Tongdao is not a demon king, and he is not born to fight with people. Therefore, he can save a little effort, he is naturally willing. Sister Jieyuzhu is not very obedient. When Su Tongdao just came out of the house, she obviously asked her to stay at home to watch the house and was not allowed to follow. At this time, Su Tongdao carried a bag of rice back, but saw her standing on the bridge of the ditch, frowning and looking worried. "Hold him." Su Tongdao felt a little helpless. But he didn't open her mouth to scold her. He knew that his sister was worried, because he was worried that he would suffer. "Go home." When passing in front of her, Su Tongdao whispered. Jieyuzhu whispered, and followed him back after hesitant to speak. At this time, Su Tongdao was embarrassed. "I just threw Su Hongbing on the ground and beaten it twice." Although Su Hongbing was embarrassed and full of mud, his body was not clean, Su Tongdao was not clean. The ground that had just rained was muddy, and his trouser legs, upper body jacket, were also stained. Lots of mud. But the nearby villagers, men, women, and children, looking at him at this time, none of them laughed at him. Seemed to know him for the first time, looking at him with different eyes. This makes Su Tongdao very satisfied. This is what he wants. Now his unsuspecting father is missing, and only a few of them are orphans and widows. In Sujia village, where there are so many bullies and hardships, he would rather make people afraid of him than make people feel pity. People who are pitied by others will also be bullied by others. Took the bag of rice on his shoulder home, and Su Tongdao went out again. Accompanied by the village chief Su Hongchun and others, he went to neighboring villages such as Baiwan village, La Huakao, Wangjiaba, etc., to ask for the things those people had moved from his house a few days ago. In the gambling game that his father participated in the other night, the people who participated were not only from his Sujia village, but also from Baiwan village, La Huakao, Wangjiaba and other villages. Anyway, when I moved to his house a few days ago, there were people from those villages. It is impossible to return all the things moved by those people. Because there were too many people moving his house that day, it was too messy. Not only Su Tongdao, who had just been reborn, couldn't remember who moved something and how much. Even his sister Jieyuzhu can't remember. What he can remember clearly is that his 2 black pigs that were about to go out of slaughter were dragged away by Wang Zhengrong, who was in the food business of Lika. Wang Zhengrong is quite famous in the nearby 10 li and 8 townships. Because of the harvest season every year, Wang Zhengrong would take his hands and carts to buy food from village to village. This person is rich and has the habit of gambling money when he is not busy. In addition, when he took people to drag the 2 pigs from Sutong Taoist school that day, there was a lot of noise. So Tongdao Su was very impressed with him. Even though Su Hongchun and others from the village were accompanied, when Su Tongdao came to ask for the 2 pigs, they still had to come back. Because of the 2 pigs, one was sold by Wang Zhengrong, the other was slaughtered and eaten by his family, and some pork was sold by the way. In order to prove that the 2 pigs were indeed gone, Wang Zhengrong took Su Tongdao and the others to look at the tufts of pig hair in the corner of his yard. At that time, Su Tongdao's face was terribly ugly. Almost couldn't control his unicorn arm, and wanted to hit Wang Zhengrong's fat face with a fist. Was held by the village accountant standing beside him. Then the village chief Su Hengchun stepped forward and pulled Wang Zhengrong into the house to discuss for a while. When they came out again, Wang Zhengrong held a few hundred yuan bills and handed them to Su Tongdao with a depressed expression. Xiaodao, right? It stands to reason, your dad gambled and lost money to me, and now I can't find your dad. I should go to your house and take 2 pigs, but since your village chief has all come, then I should give them a face, pig. I don't have to pay you back, here is 700 yuan, you take it. This matter is even cleared, but if your dad comes back, I still want to get the money owed to me. I want to make it clear to you. Su Tongdao waited for him to finish, and saw him handing a few large bills in front of him, and reached out to take it with a calm face. I counted, it was indeed 700 yuan. This year, the price of a pig cannot be sold. It is normal for an adult pig that has been fed for half a year to sell for 300 to 500 yuan. So, he did not have another attack. Nodded, turned around and left. Whether the pig came back, the chicken and the duck, he didn't want to come back too in the end, the others were slaughtered and eaten. People looked at the face of the village chief Su Hengchun and others, but in the end they were converted into money and returned to him. A chicken or duck is only converted into 20 or 30 yuan. Only a few years old hen was converted to 80 yuan per piece. Even so, after the final count, it still doesn't count. Sister told him that there were 24 chickens and 8 ducks that were stolen, but in the end Su Tongdao only had to return 3 chickens, 1 duck and the other 5 chickens and ducks. Other? He can't remember who robbed a few of them, and they won't admit it. What can he do? Even paddy and rice only need 300 caddies of rice and 50 caddies of rice. That's all. Others, no one admits it. Su Tongdao knew that this was probably the best result, and there was no point in insisting on it. Moreover, it was because the village chief and others accompanied him to those people's homes. Otherwise, if he went from house to house alone, he might not come back so much. On the way back, he carried a large bag of rice and walked ahead. Yu reading www.yuyukanshu.com looked down and thought about his next way out, appearing relatively silent. The village chief and others helped him carry the 3 chickens and a duck. The other rice have been sent back to Su Tongdao's house a few times ago. Looking at Su Tongdao, who bowed his head and drove silently, Su Hengchun sighed and said, Xiaodao, look at the opening point. It's not bad to be able to come back with such things. This thing just passed, okay. Accountants and others also followed to persuade. Su Tongdao hummed. The accountant looked at the bag of rice on Su Tongdao's shoulder, and asked kindly, Xiaodao, can you still carry it? Or I will help you carry it. You are still a child after all. This proposal has been mentioned several times along the way. Su Tongdao still shook his head this time, no, I can carry it, it's okay. After a pause, Su Tongdao let out a sigh of relief and said, a few uncles and aunts, thank you for helping me get so many things back. Those chickens and ducks, you can share them and take them back to eat. Be it me, I invite you to dinner. Village chief Su Hengchun coughed, what are you talking about? We are all village cotters, and we are all your elders. Do you have such a small favor for your family, can you still ask for your things? Don't be polite with us, we are all. I know that your family's life is not easy now. We will send these chickens and ducks back to your house for you, so let's save the eggs and eat them at your house. Yes. Trail, we can't want your cattle. That's right. We are village cotters, what's the matter if you want something from you? Xiaodao, you kid, don't be polite to us. If you have anything in the future, please come to the village to find us. Several village cotters say you or me, no one wants his chickens and ducks. When they returned to Sujia village, the village chief Su Hongchun and the others went back to their homes, and only asked 2 village officials to carry the 3 chickens and 1 duck to help Su Tongdao bring them home. Sent to Su Tong Taoist school, put down the chickens and ducks, and the 2 village cotters also left. At this time, it was almost noon. It stands to reason that Su Tongdao should stay with them for dinner, and he did stay, but the 2 village cotters glanced at the 2 vegetarian dishes on his table, and they both shook their heads and said not to be so polite, and insisted to leave. Seeing this, Su Tongdao did not insist on staying. He saw the dishes on his table at noon today, and it was really not suitable for guests to eat. Just a stir-fried water spinach and a stir-fried green pepper. "Brother, are you hungry? Why don't you eat first? Don't wait for the second brother." Ji Yuzhu, who had already prepared his food, jogged up to Su Tongdao at this time, looking at the packets of rice in the hall, and the 3 chickens and a duck with his feet on the ground. He was happy, and his tone became lighter. "A lot." This morning, when Su Tongdao was going out to find those people asking for something, she was still worried and wanted to persuade Su Tongdao not to go. But then when I saw the village chief and the others helping my elder brother to get those things, especially when he saw packages of rice being moved back home, Ji Yuzhu's mood was completely different. She is watching all the difficulties at home recently. If it hadn't been for the second aunt's house and borrowed 2 bags of rice, their house would have been unable to open the pot a long time ago. And today, she watched her elder brother move back home with 6 or 7 bags of rice and a bag of rice. She was naturally overjoyed. Because it means that at least the next few months, their family won't be hungry. As for 3 chickens and 1 duck to come back, it is even more unexpected. "You help me serve rice." Su Tongdao casually ordered his sister, then bent over to untie the straw rope on the 3 chicken legs on the ground, untied one, and threw one into the chicken coop. He is not sure if these 3 chickens are the original chickens of his family. He probably isn't. If it's really not, then you have to prevent these 3 chickens from running away. The chicken coop in his house is in the corner of the hall near the door, to the east. These days, rural families support their families, and many families are like this. A wooden chicken coop, square and square, the top can be used as a table to put things. Chickens and ducks are usually stocked outside during the day, at night they will go home by themselves and get into the chicken coop for the night. If it weren't the chickens and ducks raised by the family, once they were released, they would definitely not know that they were back. Therefore, Su Tongdao untied the straw rope on a chicken leg, threw it into the chicken coop, and immediately closed the chicken coop door to prevent the chicken from running away. According to his experience, these 3 chickens may have to be kept in the chicken coop for many days before being released. As for laying eggs, within a month or 2, I'm afraid I can't count on it. He remembered that his mother used to say, passing chickens will not lay eggs for a long time. And the so-called passing chicken refers to a chicken caught from one family to another. Because a chicken has little courage, it will be severely frightened as soon as a person catches it, and the sequelae after the fright is that it does not lay eggs for a long time. When he shut the 3 chickens into the chicken coop, and was about to untie the straw rope on the duck's leg, Su Tongdao hesitated for a moment, and did not untie the rope on its leg, and directly locked it in the chicken coop. He plans to kill it for the stew this afternoon. Just as a celebration of returning so many things today. Actually, the main reason is that he thinks that there is only such a duck left, and it will not be easy to raise it in the future. Chickens and ducks were originally animals that liked to huddle in groups. When there were 8 of them, they could be released during the day to find food on their own. When someone saw a group of ducks, they would usually not steal them. But if it's a duck going out, maybe someone will steal it home and stew it. In Su Tongdao's memory, Sujiakan has never lacked anyone who stalked the dog. So, instead of the duck being stewed by others in the future, he might as well stew it himself. Just can make up for my mother and them. When Su Tongdao and his sister Ji Yuzhu were halfway through their meal, there was a sound of footsteps outside the door. The two brothers and sisters followed the reputation and saw that Su Tonglu was back. Su Tonglu, who is 1 year younger than Su Tongdao, is not shorter than Su Tongdao, and his face is also different. Su Tongdao has a long face, and Su Tonglu has a national character face. But thin, the brothers are almost the same. Su Tonglu, who went out to fish for a whole morning, wore only a pair of big pants and a white vest, and a self-made harpoon in his left hand, about 5 meters long, and a bunch of fish strung together with poplar branches in his right hand. Different sizes. Is mainly crucian carp. The big one is half a catty small, and the small one is only the size of a cigarette case. Barefoot, walked to the gate with a grunt, leaned the harpoon against the gate, stomped the mud on his feet, and walked into the hall. My sister Jieyuzha saw the string of fish in Su Tonglu's hand, her eyes lit up, she immediately got up and ran over, took the string of fish from Su Tonglu's hand, and said happily, "Great! We have fish tonight." There was no smile on Su Tonglu's face. He raised his eyes and glanced at Su Tongdao who was eating, and Jieyuzha had just eaten half of his rice bowl on the table. Su Tonglu frowned, "Are you not waiting for me to come back for dinner? This kid has had a bad temper since he was young." There is no respect or fear for his brother Su Tongdao, who is only 1 year older than him. Yu reading www.yuucananshu.com has been arrogant since childhood. His arrogance comes from many sources. For example, he has never lost a fight with his peers since he was a child. For example, he started in elementary school, and his academic performance has always been the first in the class. For example, his Hansen ability is very strong, he can make all the toys that others can make, and he is generally better than others. If you're hungry, serve your own meal. Who do you want to show your face? Go. Su Tongdao squinted at him angrily, not used to his stinking problem. It turned out that in that time and space, after their father disappeared, Su Tonglu became more and more lawless. He didn't listen to anyone's words. His mother couldn't control him, and Su Tongdao couldn't control this kid. As a result, this kid's path went further and further. Finally, he managed to die and went to prison to eat public meals. Now, to live a lifetime, he will not let this kid free himself again. When necessary, he doesn't mind to beat this kid with his fists and feet, anyway, he can't make him lawless. Humph! Su Tonglu snorted coldly, and stared at Su Tongdao coldly. As a result, as soon as he walked 2 steps, he stopped because he saw the few packs of rice by the wall. Looked confused, what are these things? Where did they come from? The rice are wrapped in a snakeskin bag, so he can't see what's inside. Jieyuzha smiled and said happily, "It's rice, both of which my eldest brother went to come back this morning. There are 3 chickens and a duck." Rice? Where did you get it back from? Su Tonglu is even more puzzled. Subconsciously walked over quickly and opened a bag to check. "Those creditors came to our house a few days ago and moved a lot of things and left. Brother went and asked for a lot of money back this morning. By the way, there is also our TV set. Brother is also coming back." Jieyuzha briskly explained to Su Tonglu. Su Tonglu's expression was overwhelmingly surprised. He looked at the patty and rice by the wall, and then went to the master bedroom to look at the TV that came back. When he came out, he heard the quack of old ducks from the chicken coop, and he couldn't help but bend down and bow his head. He glanced at the chicken coop and saw that there were 3 more chickens and a duck inside. He frowned and asked Su Tongdao, "Why didn't you call me along with this incident? Also, those people moved away that day. Rice, as well as chickens and ducks, are far more than these, right? Are there any other restaurants that haven't been there? Let's go together in the afternoon." Su Tongdao stopped his chopsticks when he heard the words, glanced at him, and said faintly, "I can only come back so much. Why? Su Tonglu raised his voice, frowning tighter. Su Tongdao continued to eat without paying attention to him. Seeing this, my sister Jieyuzha quickly helped explain, "Second brother, it was so messy that day, so many people came to our house to move things, can we remember who moved what? How much? And, even if we can remember, but there is no evidence. If people don't admit how much they have moved, we can't do anything else. It's pretty good that the eldest brother can come back so much." Su Tonglu. After a while, Su Tonglu raised his foot to the kitchen with a sullen face. "Not long after, I came back with a bowl of rice and served it to the table with vegetables for dinner. At this time, Jieyuzhu also returned to the table for dinner. For a while, the three of them did not speak any more and ate silently. After a while, Su Tongdao was ready to eat. Put down his chopsticks, picked up the tea mug on the table and drank 2 sips of water. After putting down the tea mug, he looked at his brother Su Tonglu, who was sitting across from him, and his sister Jieyuzhu, who was sitting on his right. Said with a flat expression, "Our dad shouldn't be back again. As the saying goes, the eldest brother is like a father. You two will listen to me in the future. Have you heard?" As soon as he spoke, his sister Jieyuzha stopped her chopsticks. When he finished speaking, Su Tonglu stopped his chopsticks, raised his head and squinted at Su Tongdao disdainfully, with a disdainful tone, "You get me down. You are 1 year older than me, what do you say to me, the eldest brother is like a father? Now, why are you sure that our dad will not come back? Maybe he will be back in a few days." Sister Jieyuzhu looked at her elder brother, and then at her second elder brother, but she stopped talking. Su Tongdao did not go to see her, but stared at Su Tonglu who challenged his authority, and said coldly, "Even if I am 1 day older than you, I am also your eldest brother. If you dare not be obedient, I will smoke you." "You dare?" Su Tonglu struggled with his neck. Su Tongdao stared at him coldly, and Su Tonglu looked back at him with cold eyes. Su Tongdao secretly gritted his teeth and resisted the urge to smoke this kid right away, not because he was afraid that he would not be able to beat his brother, but because he knew his brother's unruly character. He was afraid that he would beat him now, and when he was finished, this kid would run away from home. Someone might not dare to run away from home, but his brother Su Tonglu might really dare. "When you look back, you will know if I dare." Su Tongdao put down these words, got up and went to the chicken coop to take out the old duck with his feet tied up, and took it to the back kitchen to kill. Su Tonglu sneered, with a look of dissatisfaction and disbelief. To Su Tongdao, killing ducks is easy to learn. Yuan Shikeng, because his father has not returned since his disappearance, he went to society early, cooking, washing, and sanitation, he had to do it himself. When I go home during Chinese New Year holidays, his mother will kill a chicken or a duck. Not to mention, he also worked as a chef for several years later. When he came to the kitchen, he put the duck on the ground casually, took a porcelain bowl, scooped half a bowl of clear water from the water tank, and then scooped some fine salt into the clear water in the bowl, and took a kitchen knife. Stir in the bowl with the tip of a knife to melt the salt in the water. This half bowl of salted water will be used to collect duck blood when he kills ducks later. The duck blood is mixed with the salted water and left for about half an hour, then it will coagulate slightly. Pour it into a pot of boiling water and cook for a while, it will turn into blood tofu. He knows all these things. Put the bowl and kitchen knife on the stove, he picked up the gourd scoop, scooped some clean water from the water tank, poured it into the pot, covered the lid, and went to the stove to ignite and prepare to boil the water. To kill a duck, you need boiling water to dehair the duck. When doing these things, he has been a little distracted. Killing ducks and stewing ducks are not difficult for him. He can do these things by instinct. He is thinking about what to do next and what to do to make the life of this family better and better. Before his rebirth, he had been mixed up and didn't read much. Now, after rebirth, he doesn't think he is qualified to do some high-level industries. Not only because he doesn't understand, but also because his family is poor and has no capital. But to live a life again, if he were to just go to a job honestly, earn some dead wages to support his brother and sister in school, and support his mother by the way, he would also feel that this inexplicable opportunity for rebirth would be a bit too wasteful. He knows that there are actually many upstarts who have no culture. The reason why those upstarts can make a fortune is often because they have seized a good opportunity. Such a good opportunity, before he was reborn, he had never seized it, and with his eyes, there was no good opportunity. But he is now reborn, and he knows better than anyone what industries will make money in the next few decades. So, what good opportunities are there, he knows. Apart from anything else, when the real estate industry breaks out, as long as he buys a few more houses at low prices in advance, he will post them in his lifetime. This is the easiest way to get rich, he knows. But now it is still several years before the real estate explosion. The most important thing is that his family is too poor. He has a father who is a good gambler. His family is already poorer than most people in the village. What's more, his dad is missing now, and even the only money-making labor force is gone. Therefore, his top priority should be to make money quickly. Otherwise, even if he knew that in a few years, the real estate industry would skyrocket, and he would not have the money to participate. Skillfully lit the stove and put sticks of dry wood into the stove, and there was a sound of footsteps in front of the kitchen door. "Brother, I'll help you," is the voice of Sister Jieyushu. Su Tongdao glanced up at her, patted the dust on his hands, got up, picked up the porcelain bowl and kitchen knife on the stove, and walked towards the quacking old duck on the ground. "Okay. You help me carry the duck, carry my feet. Grab the wings." "Hey, good." The younger sister was very obedient. She bent down and picked up the duck's 2 feet. With the other hand, she grabbed the duck's wings. Su Tongdao placed the porcelain bowl with salt water on the ground, the kitchen knife was placed across the mouth of the bowl, and the duck's head was pinched in one hand. Cleanly plucked a bunch of hair from the duck's neck with one hand, then picked up the kitchen knife, and casually ordered to my sister, "Carry a little taller." "Hey! Good." My sister heard the words and immediately raised the duck higher. Su Tongdao picked up the kitchen knife casually and slashed the neck of the duck that had just been plucked. The red duck blood suddenly poured into the salt water in the porcelain bowl. The dying duck struggled desperately, but to no avail. After a while, no blood came out from the slit neck.